right, we're 95% of the way there. Continue to make your way towards your seats, please. We'll begin with our introductions. I'll take that glass, bring that on, absolutely. All right. Wow, what a crowd. Thank you for joining us today for the State of the State. Look around the room, you got 599 of your closest friends here with us today. A huge crowd to welcome our state's executive officer, Governor John Hickenlooper, who'll be joining us here in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, I'd like to introduce some of our special guests today. Dave Lineweber, I'm going to start calling you guys out by name. Have a seat, please. Good afternoon, I'm Dirk Draper. I'm the President and CEO of the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you to the State of the State Luncheon. Thank you for joining us today, as Governor Hickenlooper will join us momentarily to share many of our state's successes over the last few years and opportunities that lie ahead for us in Colorado. It's my honor to introduce a lot of elected folks and special VIPs here today. If you would, we've got 30 names I'm going to read. Please hold your applause till the end, and let's give them all a good hearty round of welcome here in a few minutes. I'd like to start with, from the state of Colorado, and I'm going to hold off on the governor. He is not here yet, but I will introduce Secretary of State Wayne Williams. Again, thank you for not applauding Wayne. It's not about you. It's about everybody else together. So you got it right. Our Transportation Commissioner from District 9, Rocky Scott. From El Paso County, folks, I'm going to go through them quickly and we'll go on, so bear with me. Here we go. From El Paso County, from our Board of County Commissioners, Board President Darrell Glenn, and President Pro Tem Mark Waller, and their fellow commissioners, Peggy Littleton, Lojinos Gonzalez Jr., and Stan Vanderwerf. Our County Clerk and Recorder, Chuck Broerman, and our County Administrator, Henry Yankowski. From the City of Colorado Springs, Mayor John Suthers, Council President Richard Scorman, City Council President Pro Tem Jill Gabler, and their fellow councilors Yolanda Avila, Murph Bennett, Don Knight, Andy Pico, and Tom Strand. And from the Mayor's office, his Chief of Staff and the City's Chief Administrative Officer, Jeff Green. Jeff, raise your hand there. Jeff, there you go. All right. From the City of Manitou Springs, Mayor Ken Giray. Glad you can join us today, Ken. Thank you. From two of our school districts, boards are well represented here today. From Harrison District 2, we're in their territory. Board members Yesenia Torres, Jeannie Orozco, Linda Pugh, and Eileen Gonzalez. And from Colorado Springs School District 11, their Board of Education, Board President Jim Mason, and board presidents, they've got a table back in the back of the room, the red napkins waving back there. Board members Sean Gullickson, Teresa Knoll, Julie Ott, Nora Brown, Mary Coleman, and Elaine Naleski. From Fort Carson, it's a real pleasure to welcome their garrison commander, one of our men in uniform here today, Colonel Ron Fitch. And from Schriever Air Force Base, Vice Commander, also in uniform today, Vice Commander, 50th Space Wing, Air Force Space Command, Colonel Jacob Middleton. From U.S. Senator Cory Gardner's office, Samantha Gunther. And from Congressman Doug Lamborn's office, Dean Miller. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in giving a big round of applause to those folks for their public service. And here's kind of a fun thing. This is a little inside business for us. A couple of leaders from our other regional chambers of commerce. It's a pleasure to welcome from the Tri-Lakes Chamber of Commerce EDC and Visitor Center, President and CEO Terry Hayes. And from the Greater Woodland Park Chamber of Commerce, President Debbie Miller. Welcome them from our regional groups. And finally, again, got the volume up. And finally, again, one more group to recognize. The Chamber and EDC's Board of Directors are well represented here. I'd like to say thank you to them for your dedicated leadership of our organization. Board members, would you stand up for just a minute? Thank you for your leadership and the strategic vision you provide us. You can see around the room well represented and senior business leaders. Thank you for your work. And special thanks today. Doubletree by Hilton is our host. Thank you to PSAV for their audio visuals. And both the city and county are live streaming our broadcast today. And special thanks to the city for filming and live streaming today's event. So thank you to those groups. This is an exciting time to be in business in Colorado Springs and the Pikes Peak region. Here across the county and across our region, fueled by new development, by high quality job growth, and by competitive affordability, we're seeing the area thrive because of visionaries, business visionaries like you here in the room today. Thanks to your investment and involvement in our business community, we are propelling Colorado Springs forward. Job creation in the last 3 years has far exceeded the threshold that's identified by our economists at UCCS that we need to keep our employment at a pace with our population growth. We expect to exceed that again with our 2017 numbers when those are out. Existing businesses are expanding operations, they're growing, they're adding employees and functions and growing our business community and our presence in the state and across the country. In 2017, the Chamber and EDC worked with an increasing number of companies looking at our region for new operations, sometimes North American headquarters, sometimes just expansion within the US. We opened more than 60 case projects last year and working with businesses looking to expand in our area, and we're currently working with more than a dozen who are considering new businesses in our region. We've already had one job announcement this year, and we expect, keeping our fingers crossed, more soon, and watch for those. The voice of business in the Pikes Peak region was lifted at the legislative level because of our increased focus on government affairs and a successful campaign locally led by Mayor Suthers that our staff worked on. Rachel Beck, our Vice President of Government Affairs, helped establish funding for stormwater maintenance in our community. More individuals and companies are joining the Chamber and EDC. We are a membership organization that's driven by your investment in the work we do on behalf of the community, and your investments help make possible our work to help grow our region's economy. I appreciate the investments you've made, those of you who are represented here today. To our members and investors, I extend a special thank you. If you're new to the Chamber, if you're considering a Chamber membership, we'd love to talk to you about that today. Business is booming in Colorado Springs, and we are growing into our shoes as a world-class community. We are a world-class middleweight city in the United States, and it's proud to be here. We're a week away from the opening ceremonies for the 2018 Winter Olympics. And speaking of world-class, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Colorado Springs is Olympic City, USA. Thank you, Janet Suthers, for your work in leading that branding initiative. It's taken great hold, and it's really showing this year, again, leading into our Winter Olympics, and it's an exciting time for the city. 6 o'clock. Next Friday, join us downtown on Tejon Street in front of the Pioneers Museum, opening ceremonies, and they'll be televised live, big screen. It'll be a great time. I don't know, tens of thousands of your fellow citizens will be there. It's a great time for this community and celebrate our place on the nation's fabric as leader as Olympic City, USA. Andy Potts, if you would. Andy, join me up front. Andy Potts is an athlete. He's a coach, a father. Oh, he's right in front of me. And he was a 2004 Olympic triathlete. Today he continues to compete internationally in the Ironman triathlons. He's a seven-time Ironman triathlon champion. He's a 4-time USA Triathlete of the Year. He and his wife reside here in Olympic City, USA with their 2 children. And he's also, it's a Chamber of Commerce and EDC event, he's a small business owner. It's a real pleasure to introduce Andy Potts.
Thank you, Dirk. Thanks for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you for the warm welcome. And I guess I wanted to start off with some remarks about Olympic City and why I came here. My Olympic journey started when I was 5 years old, when I first dove into a swimming pool. I learned to swim, and I've never looked back, and it's been a great journey ever since. It took me, 18 years as a swimmer to really find my way. I was on the national team for a bunch of years. I swam at the University of Michigan, and we would come out here to Colorado Springs to train when the Olympic Training Center was built. Before the training center was built, we actually trained at the Air Force Academy. And Colorado Springs has been a beacon of hope and a beacon of what's possible for any Olympic athlete in the Olympic movement. My journey to Athens in 2004 was a circuitous route. I swam till I was 23. Then I luckily found the sport of triathlon. Did that for a short time and made my way onto the Olympic team in '04. And it was a dream come true, as that actually happened on Mother's Day in 2004. And I remember typing a letter to my mom on email. I was in Portugal and at a World Championships, and I wrote to my mom, and I remember like tears hitting the keyboard. It was really emotional for me because she had started a journey with me and really helped me pursue my dreams. In 1988, the Seoul Olympic Games, there were 2 Americans that really held our flag proudly and represented our country the best that they could, and that was Janet Evans and Matt Biondi. And I looked at them, and I was 12 years old, and I was like, you know what? That's what I want to do. I want to go to the Olympics. And at that moment, that's when my passion really it turned from this ember into this burning flame and desire. And from there, I was willing to go the extra mile, willing to go the extra laps, just to make my dream a reality. It wasn't until I found a separate sport that it actually came to fruition. But without that carrot in front of me, and without the visual of seeing what the Olympics is about, I wouldn't have been able to realize my dream. And for the greater community here in Colorado Springs, without the infrastructure that we have in place, we wouldn't have Olympic City wouldn't be Olympic City without the resources that we have at our disposal as athletes here. We not only have the rare air and the mountains, but we have the NGBs in town, national governing bodies, and we also have the United States Olympic Committee. And what they have done for the athletes and what broadcasting the Olympic Games really shows our youth is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to pursue your dreams, to pursue your goals, and to really find something in your path in life. And as an athlete, sometimes it's tried and true and straight and narrow, and sometimes it's an abyss, and you don't know what's beyond the chasm. I'm also a parent, and I've got 2 kids in elementary school in District 11, right? And my job as a parent is to open doors for my kids. I can show them what's down the hallway, but oftentimes I have to let go of their hand and say, hey, down the road is where we go. But I don't know what the end of the hallway, what's there. As a Chamber of Commerce for Olympic City, I believe it's your job to open doors for the athletes, and the potential is there. We don't know what's at the other end. We don't know who's going to qualify for the Olympics, who's going to turn into a professional athlete, or who's just going to be a great steward for the city and for the community. Hopefully they all will be. But the key is that opportunity. As Olympic City and as merchants in town, I think that the opportunity is there when we show the Olympics this month, in a couple weeks. Actually, it's at the end of this week, isn't it? I think it's the end of this week. In this month with the Olympic Games, we don't know whose fire is going to be lit. I've got a young boy who now thinks it's a very reality for him to break 4 minutes in a mile. And boy, as a parent, all I want to do is just fan those flames and make that fire burn. And as a community, I think that the opportunity is here for you to show the athletes in this community, as also in the nation as a whole, what opportunities are here in Olympic City and to help fuel their Olympic dreams. So thank you for helping my Olympic dreams to become a reality. And I continue to be a professional athlete. And so share the road to any cyclists out there. And go USA, Olympic City.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for your commitment to the Olympic ideals even after you've competed the games. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your lunch, enjoy your table companions. We'll be back in a little while.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Malin, Vice President of Operations for Microchip Technology and the 2018 Chair of the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC. It's really my pleasure to be here with you today. I love the buzz in the room. It really is the way I feel about the community right now. It's exciting to be doing business in Colorado Springs, and it's especially exciting when we realize how many people love this community and want to do what's best for Colorado Springs, and we see it in so many different areas. It's an honor today to introduce our keynote speaker, Governor John W. Hickenlooper. John Hickenlooper is a lifetime entrepreneur who was elected mayor of Denver in 2003. In 2005, Time magazine named him as one of the top 5 big city mayors in America. When he was inaugurated as governor of Colorado in 2011, he became the first Denver mayor to be elected to that office in over 100 years. Another interesting tidbit is that he's also the first brewer to be elected governor since Samuel Adams in 1792. It's no accident that Colorado is frequently recognized as a great place to start and do business. Throughout his 2 terms, Governor Hickenlooper's goal has been to create the most pro-business state government in the nation with the highest environmental and ethical standards. His administration has examined thousands of rules and regulations and either eliminated or streamlined more than half of them. Under his leadership, the Colorado Innovation Network was formed and advanced manufacturing grants were provided to accelerate startup and early technology businesses. With his team, the governor is building an integrated workforce training system that will create a single, seamless continuum for education and workforce preparation. Please join me in welcoming the governor of the state of Colorado, John Hickenlooper.
Oh, shucks. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. You're just trying to make me blush. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. It is always, always a pleasure to be back in El Paso County and in Colorado Springs. It's nice to see old friends, and Mayor Suthers, who's doing such a great job, gave me my introduction. Some would call it a trial by fire. When I became governor, and he was still Attorney General. And I think we've been able to maintain a continuously positive, constructive partnership over all these years, which, just in case any of you are wondering, doesn't mean that when we disagree, he doesn't come right to me and explain exactly why he disagrees. Just so we're perfectly clear, but always in a respectful way. We've been able to work together on any number of issues. Secretary of State Wayne Williams is here as well. I appreciate his. Where is he? He's right out here. There, back there. He is equally apartisan in doing his job. Is that a word? No, probably not. Also, and the El Paso commissioners, I'm not going to list everybody that I want to recognize, but also been a great pleasure to work with. Also want to just take a moment to remember Deputy Sheriff Heath Gum, who passed away last week and is being laid to rest today. I've come to believe that sometimes God takes the very best of us just so the rest of us will really appreciate and treasure life more. And certainly Deputy Gum was one of the very best. So thank you for your hard work. It's communities like this that make governors like me look good. I've been reflecting just over the past weekend and week over what I would say to you all, and also reflect on kind of what divides us. And by divides us, I mean not just here, but in the whole state and in the country. And one of my son's friends came up to me and we were at some event, my son and his friend, we were doing the Pledge of Allegiance. And where it gets to one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, he said, doesn't it seem sometimes like you Democrats talk more often about justice and the Republicans talk more often about liberty? And boy, I thought about that for a while. And I think that that's an interesting subject for a future date. But I do think that perhaps Democrats and Republicans do talk more frequently about either liberty or justice, depending on the party. But I do know that, because I tried this, if you ask a Democrat which one do they believe in more, they generally say liberty. And if you ask a Republican, they generally say liberty as well. Doesn't mean anybody doesn't believe in justice. But I thought it was an interesting young observation. And I think what I really want to talk today is about that part of the Pledge of Allegiance that's about indivisible. And we see so many divisions today, and I'm not talking about just between Republicans and Democrats, between urban and rural, the gap between those who have had sufficient training and education so that they're prepared for the convulsions we're going to see in our jobs, in our economy. Automation. I mean, autonomous vehicles are just the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to see all manner of major dislocations. And I think we're all going to have to start in real time putting aside the divisions and the things that really shouldn't have a partisan bent to it. It's kind of become the fashion that everything's got to be crammed into either a Republican or a Democrat issue, or a Republican or a Democrat solution. We got to get past that, and part of it, and it was a little bit in the introduction that I got, is that what I think of as love of place. I talked about this a little bit in the State of the State speech, but you were being commended as, having turned this economy around, and just by your own affection for this place, finding the will and the policies and the initiatives and the leaders, the mayor, to make sure that your love translates into a stronger economy, to better jobs, to infrastructure that works. And I think that love of place, I've come to this in a very powerful way. I think it's at the core of pretty much all economic development. And when I was in the restaurant business, we used to go around and set up brew pubs. We did Wine Coop, and then we did Fan Canyon down here. We did one in Fort Collins. I did a brew pub in Omaha and Des Moines, Rapid City, South Dakota. I would, as recreation, go out and walk downtowns all over the country. I probably walked the downtowns for a weekend, but I'd call old friends up from college or even high school and say, someone barely remembered me. I said, can I sleep on your couch? I want to see what your downtown's all about. And so in walking these, really, it was over 100 downtowns, I saw again and again the same affection and love of place that you demonstrate here every day. Keeping the streets clean, parks, statues, libraries, the investments that communities make in themselves so that they can, part of it's so that they and their families can have a better life, but you're also making those investments so that the future's a little more secure, the future jobs, the future of your children, the hope that I think almost every parent has. Most of us want our kids to go out and sow a few wild oats away from us, but we want them to come back and raise their kids in our community. Again, I don't see that as a partisan thing. when you get down to love of place, and there is a word, my staff tells me never to use this word because they think it betrays me of being kind of an SAT, elitist. But I think it's kind of a goofy word, but it's a real word. It's called topophilia. And topophilia means love of place. I read it. I did not make it up. But I think all of you have experienced it maybe after a day of hunting, getting up early and getting out there just as the sun's rising, maybe having beer at one of our more than 350 breweries in the state of Colorado, taking a family member walking through the Garden of Gods. The Garden of the Gods is one of those places that just cries out a love of place. Catherine Lee Bates took a carriage ride up Pikes Peak before she wrote America the Beautiful and described the power of the place in a letter back to her friends in the East. And that sense that rugged landscape that we love and that rugged individualism is the whole story of our economic success really isn't true. And certainly there is a strong strain of individual determination that runs throughout the history of the West. But there's also a huge amount of collaborative history. And that part is even stronger, I think, in our DNA. They never tell you this, but if you talk to the real, true historians of the West, the trappers and the early frontiersmen never went up in the mountains by themselves. They went in groups of 10 or 20 because it was just so much less dangerous and so much more productive if one guy's doing the skinning, one guy's setting the traps, one guy's cooking food, if everybody was working on a team. What they often don't say when they describe the West is that there are a lot more barn raisings than there were shootouts. And I think, who doesn't love their home and who isn't willing to invest in it? You look at what you've done here in the past 6 or 7 years, it is really a model. I remember coming down here when I first got elected governor, and I would tell Colorado Springs and El Paso County, well, here's what Fort Collins did, or here's what Boulder's been doing. For the last 2 years, I go to other cities, and I tell them here's what Colorado Springs did. You've been incentivizing businesses, you've been building infrastructure, you've been creating jobs, and most powerfully, you've been working together. And I think that part of that might be the fact that you really don't have any Democrats here, so there's not such a divide. But you have diversified. I'm going to get in trouble for that, aren't I? By my own people. You have become a diversified economy, and you can look at high tech and cyber, aerospace, military. I mean, your economy is so much broader based now than it was. You've got good schools, you've got easy commutes, and you've invested in your infrastructure to make sure that continues. Got low crime rates, you control your own utility, and you've got probably the best employment surge that you've had in a couple decades. And that didn't come easy. I watched how hard this community worked, getting through floods, right? When you're trying to turn things around the hardest. You just made an amazing commitment to your own community, which really is the only way this kind of change ever occurs. I can't wait. I have not been out to UCCS's to see the Ent Center for Arts, but several of my staff have been there, and they are blown away. And again, those are the kinds of investments, when you get those in your community, they pay dividends for a long time. We launched a couple years ago the National Cybersecurity Center, really making Colorado Springs a national hub around cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is not something that's going to go away or become less important. And your leadership, the mayor, the university, Chamber of Commerce, everybody got that and understood it had to be a focus. And now that center, I don't know if Vance Brown is out there, if you get a chance to see Vance Brown, who's taken over the National Center for Cybersecurity as a CEO and has, I mean, the man is is a runaway train. I mean that in the best way possible. He has a determination and a focus and an energy that is masterful. And he is going to make that institution the biggest and the best in the country. You just watch. So thank him when you see it. There are a lot of things he could be doing with his time, which would pay him a whole lot more money than again, through his affection for Colorado Springs, working to make that the best it can be. The Springs is already home to over 100 cybersecurity companies. As that center grows, that's just going to mushroom and get bigger and bigger. You look at the Olympic Training Center and all the stuff to make Olympic City really the Olympic City, Air Force Academy, all those investments as you've diversified your economy are just going to grow even better. And I think in many ways, how you've done it does set an example for Washington and for the rest of the state. That sense of collaboration and trying to listen harder. You know, I've become convinced in the last 7 years that when you disagree with somebody and you want to persuade them to maybe change their thoughts a little bit, the best way to do that is not to tell them what you think and why they're wrong. That's probably the worst. I spend most of my life doing that. The best way is just to sit down and listen and ask them again and again for them to explain to you the different aspects of why they care and believe what they do. I think that collaborative effort that you've demonstrated here and we've tried to use throughout the state has a lot to do with the turnaround the whole state's had. You know, sometimes it seems inevitable, right? That well, of course Colorado's going to turn around. You know, back then it didn't seem inevitable, I'll tell you. You know, we were 26th in unemployment. We were 40th in job growth. Now, depending on which measurement you look at, we're either first, second, or third in job growth. Last summer, we got down to 2.3% unemployment. That's the lowest of any state in the history of America. We shattered the record in unemployment. We've also shattered a record every year in tourism. We've really turned tourism from just bringing people into the state to enjoy the wonders and the recreation of the state and then going home. Tourism now is about showing off the whole state and how pro-business we are and what a great place this is for entrepreneurs. And certainly Colorado Springs, I know 3 or 4 specific individuals who came here first on a vacation and then figured out a way to be able to come here professionally. I think in many ways we are one of the healthiest states. We are not the healthiest state. We're one of the healthiest states, but we're certainly the thinnest state. What I always tell people, though, is if you look at our obesity rates today, and you took where we are, still the lowest obesity rate in the country, but you take that obesity rate and you put it back 20 years ago, we would have been the worst. So the whole country has shifted from what was once the worst is now the best, and it's a bad sign. What I really want to talk about today, and I'm not going to go on at length. I obviously had to spend a lot of time telling you guys how great you were. I've learned a few things in my time. But I want to say that part of getting to nonpartisan solutions, part of getting to this love of place is to make sure that we don't leave people behind or leave parts of our state behind. And you know, as your success, and I remember when I would come down here and Denver was starting to boom, and there were a lot of, let's just say, pointed comments of why wasn't the state doing more to help El Paso County, or why wasn't the state doing more? We still here at Pueblo's just beginning to get to where you guys got a couple years ago. The state does what it can. Maybe it needs a little help and needs to be reminded sometimes. And certainly we could use more resources available for economic development efforts. In terms of rural Colorado, I think we're going to need even more. And I think DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, takes severance taxes, some other revenue sources, and really is focused on, I think, one of the real challenges that keeps rural Colorado from keeping up. And just to frame this, I don't think, if we don't have a strong, vibrant rural economy, I don't think the state will ever be as strong or as successful as it needs to be. And I think that is every one of our responsibility. We may think we live in the city, we don't, we could import our food. I don't believe that. I think we need to be prepared to have our own sustainable sources of food. And I believe that our traditional Western heritage, ranching and farming, that is a crucial part of what gives us part of that love of place and our strength. And if we let that decline, and it's been declining, if we let it continue to decline, we should do so at our own peril. So first on that is that I think we need to commit ourselves to making sure we have high-speed broadband in every town, in every county in this state. And we started this about 6 years ago now. And we have had some great successes. You look, Montrose, Meeker, Rangeley, Delta, these are small towns on the West Slope, and they have redundant high-speed broadband. We've just put together a 1 gig fiber network that's going to cover all of Delta County. So that's now you're getting into Hotchkiss, Paonia, Orchard City, Cedar Edge. And these are towns that once you give them that high-speed broadband, then small businesses and entrepreneurs can set up shop out there. And this is equally true on the Eastern Plains as it is on the West Slope. We formed last year the Colorado Rural Venture Fund. So $9 million is going to be spent specifically, and this is private money. I could see a few people raising their eyebrows. I know the crowd I'm talking to. This is private money that's going to be spent focusing on starting, job nucleation, business nucleation, creating, opportunity in our rural community. We started 5 years ago something called Startup Colorado, which was kind of a spin-off from what they call Silicon Flatirons. It's a part of the University of Colorado Boulder, and was tied together with our Office of Economic Development, but really to start building the same network that's helped you succeed, your tech companies here succeed, and Denver Boulder has a strong network like that. It's different to start it in the rural part of the state, but it's equally possible. And that effort to build the network allowed us to do Colorado Jumpstart 4 years ago, which now, again, this doesn't sound like a lot, but the idea was to give tax relief to new businesses in rural parts of the state, tax relief for the business and for the employees. And so we've now created about 338 jobs in small rural communities. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. And we're going to push it even harder, turn the dial up a little more, offer a little more incentive. There's probably a few entrepreneurs here that would consider starting a business in one of the smaller towns in the state. We started Space to Create. Now in Trinidad, we're working on about a $16 million housing, affordable housing program in partnership with Trinidad. But a big part of that is to get creative people, artists, musicians, entrepreneurs, we count them as creative people, to also put their efforts into a town like Trinidad. Because again, I think it benefits Colorado Springs and El Paso County if Trinidad does better. And for the life of me, I look at all those tourists flooding into Santa Fe. I think Trinidad's cooler. Just do. All these things, the infrastructure becomes important. And it's not just broadband. Water, long term, we created the Colorado Water Plan 3.5 years ago, and we had over 30,000 people work on that. Most of the funding for it is going to be generated through the projects themselves, the sale of the water, but we're probably $1 billion, $1.5 billion short. And we should, as a state, that's over 30 years, that's a relatively small amount of money. And yet it's something that's crucial for those rural parts of the state, because people in Denver, people in Colorado Springs are always going to, your water bill is just such a small part of your monthly budget, at least for most people, that if it's an extra $1 or $2, you don't care. But that increase in the price of water, or what an urban area, an urban user will pay for water, puts it way out of the range of ranchers and farmers using it for irrigation. And again, I think we neglect water at our own peril. Certainly, we're always going to have enough water for our cities and suburbs. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about making sure that we have one of the most vibrant and successful rural economies in the country, because it's going to be part of our brand, and it's going to be something that will help all of us attract entrepreneurs and attract our children to come back and raise their families. I think that ultimately we have an opportunity right now with the transformation that's going on in terms of the economy. We're really in the middle of a run and an opportunity as productivity increases through all these technological innovations. We have some real chances to seize the moment. And some of this is in alternative energy, wind and solar. And, I don't think the federal policies are going to make much difference. Right now, wind is so inexpensive. You don't need a subsidy anymore. Solar is coming down so dramatically. We're going to have cleaner energy at a lower cost, which has always been the kind of the dream, and it's a good thing. And we now have the capacity, so if people lose their jobs working at a coal plant or lose their jobs working in a coal mine, we have the ability to train them in real time and hopefully get them better paying jobs. And I mean, I'm sincere when I say that we can do that. I realize you guys have your own generating plant here that is a cause or an issue of discussion. I am not wading into that. All I'm saying is that the country is moving towards cleaner sources of energy and is increasingly able to do that at a lower cost. Anyway, I say all this I've got a year left. And we're actually announcing a guy, I can't say anything until 2/15 because he works for a very large corporation. We're hiring a guy who's going to be our new Secretary of Labor who understands how we're going to retrain and how we're going to make sure that we adapt our entire arc of education and training to be prepared for how rapidly this new economy is evolving. But he's going to come work for 11 months is what he's going to have left. He's going to take all the different programs we're working on, and he's going to create what I believe, and he believes, will be a national model. And just for the record, he's going to take about a 95% pay cut. So even though I can't say his name, once you hear about it this afternoon, when you see him, thank him. And I think all that, he's doing this. He's going to come work for 11 months. He's going to leave millions of dollars in options and millions of dollars on the table because he loves Colorado, right? And because he wants to be part of this amazing success that right now you guys are the perfect example of. So I get to say this from time to time. I'll just finish up and say, on behalf of the entire state of Colorado, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I know you guys are just clapping because you think it's the last time you're going to have to listen to me, and it might be the case. I think we have time for a few. They asked me if I could stay for an extra 10 minutes. Those of you who have to leave and get back to business, I'm not offended, but there was some. Historically, this group has been some of the most engaging question askers in the state. No questions. Good. Phew. Yes.
So the question you didn't address is transportation. We're all following the bill and the discussion.
The question was the thing I didn't describe and was in my speech. I took it out because I think the way a lot of people are leaning is to have some sort of sales tax that will allow us to get caught up. We're hopelessly behind. And even Senate Bill 267, the hospital provider fee last year, generated a bonding of $1.9 billion that'll be used for infrastructure, 25% of it, which is a good thing in rural Colorado. That's not even close to enough. The reason I took it out of the speech is I think you are a unique place where you did what people should be doing. You said we're not going to sit around and wait. We're going to address this problem ourselves. And one thing we did get with that $1.9 billion is we are going to complete the space between Denver and Colorado Springs, finally. So But when I look at, and John Southers was the first person before I'd even thought of it, when we were talking about sales tax last year, when you guys are already paying a sales tax, how fair is it to ask you to pay a sales tax to help the rest of the state? And I don't think I think that's a question I don't have an answer for. I'm not saying I won't find an answer. Mayor Southers will tell you from time to time, even after he'd assumed that I had given up the field of battle, I will come back sometimes with a different idea. But I don't see that idea here, and there are a couple of other potential revenue sources that I think might be beneficial, and in that case, then Colorado Springs would be able to get the full benefit, because obviously I know I've seen your list of other investments you need to make in your traffic infrastructure as well. So hopefully there is a way to address that. I was hoping I could just slip out of here without having to talk about it, but I knew that there'd be somebody. No, thank you. I should have just waded in and explained it, except then I would have, instead of 25 minutes, I would have been at 30 minutes. Yeah.
Governor, thank you for being here. As you reflect, what's the one thing that you feel you've left undone?
To be honest, we started working on rural economic development the first week I came in, and we've tried to make it a priority. This last state speech, a reporter told me I used the word rural 20 times, which was, 8 times more than I did the previous year, or 6 times more than any year. But when we did what we called the bottom-up economic development plan, we went to every county and asked each county what they wanted to see as what their economic future should look like. What kind of businesses or industries did they want? And that meant that all 64 counties, of which 54 counties are dominantly rural, that allowed them to have their own vision. And so we've been trying to get them the resources to take care of that. That would be the place I probably would hold out. I could have focused a little more strongly 7 years ago instead of 5 years ago on broadband. But for the first 3 years, nobody listened anyway, so I didn't, I guess that was maybe, you call it naivete, that I should have recognized that the people in the urban areas are not going to be aggressive about trying to respond to rural challenges immediately. It takes a while for them to recognize that this is one state and we are all joined together. I don't think, it's funny, some of my staff has, 6 months ago banned me from any new ideas. Or it was maybe a year ago. And literally 2 weeks later, we came in, and I've been talking to a couple of musician friends. There's a great guy named Isaac Slade. And someday you should get him to come down and talk here. He's the lead singer for a band called The Fray. Grew up in Denver. He wrote that song, How to Save a Life. If you heard it, you'd know it. But anyway, he and I kind of decided that Colorado should be the first state in America where any kid who wanted to learn to play music should have access to an instrument and a teacher. And so he took hold of that. We're now the co-chairs of something called Take Note Colorado. We raised almost $1 million. All the Lumineers, all our big rock and roll bands have done benefits to raise money for it. And it's a great idea and something I probably should have thought of before, or made Isaac think of it before. But you're always going to keep having ideas. I don't feel like there's something that we've been talking about transportation infrastructure for 7 years, every single year. I don't feel any regrets about that. Maybe affordable housing. As your economy grows, you're going to have the same problems everybody else does with rapidly increasing rental and housing costs, and your school teachers, your firefighters, all kinds of people that are working at middle income wages are going to get priced out of your community. And I don't think, now that I spent a lot of time working on this, I think somehow you have to figure out, in all that prosperity, to take a sliver out of it. And whether you ask developers in each new project or home builders or charge some way, but the private sector will not be able to deal with this on their own. And I think that's a pretty good measure of when you really have to call government. Private sector won't do broadband in rural parts of the state because it just doesn't generate enough money. And I think there's a real benefit to everybody to make sure we do have broadband. In the same way, I think there's benefit to everyone to make sure people can afford to live in our communities. Anything else? You bet. Yeah, so we put last year an extra $10 million to go to sheriffs about black and gray market marijuana. We are going to increase that depending on the results and what best practices are. We recognize it as a serious problem. I do say, when I was talking to Attorney General Sessions, who brought up the same issue, I said, well, close as our estimate is, it's about a $50 million issue. It might be as much as a $100 million issue. Well, I don't know. That's what we've gotten from looking at all the sheriffs, what they think their market is. And where we know now legally it's $1.3 billion is what the industry is in Colorado. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was all black and gray market. So I'm not saying it's not a serious problem, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't put more money to it, and I think the state has an obligation to fund the sheriff's office around the state. Where there's got an issue, we need to take some of that marijuana money and put it to work, because it's unacceptable. A big part of why a lot of people voted to legalize recreational marijuana was because they wanted to get rid of the drug dealers, right? Drug dealers will sell it to anybody. And we won't be able to get rid of drug dealers and the illegal elements that are around marijuana unless we get rid of that black and gray market. So we hear you, and talk to the General Assembly. Part of the problem is they don't always do what I suggest. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with most of that. The economy is changing so fast, and I'll tell you something. So we put in 4 major software systems in the state, big ones. We actually put in 7 or 8 pretty large software systems. And Kristen Russell, who was my first Secretary of Technology, Chief Information Officer, who I hired right when I first got elected in 2000, took office in 2011. And she was the Senior Vice President of Global IT Services for Oracle. I mean, she was 40 years old, brilliant, talented. And so we put in those first few big systems. And I kept saying, where are the job savings? We paid all this money, and certainly we can do all this additional. We have this capacity to serve the citizens of Colorado and do much more and understand what we're doing and correct mistakes and do a better job. But I thought there'd be a whole bunch of jobs that we could take off and help pay for the maintenance of this new system. And it doesn't. In almost every case, we end up hiring more people to maintain and improve the software systems. And so you ask around, talk to people in business. I did. And pretty much everybody says the same thing. So I think we're going to create as many jobs as we eliminate. It's the pathway that's going to be so rugged. In other words, we have to get out ahead of those professions that are going to get eliminated and make sure we're doing the right retraining before they're in a state of unemployment. I got laid off as an exploration geologist in oil and gas in 1986. And that's what led me to open the Wine Coop Brewing Company in 1988. I was out of work for 2 years. Now, the last year I was working on starting the brew pub. But that first year I'd go out on job interviews, and after about 6 or 8 months, and everyone just looks at the desk and they don't really have any questions for you because they're not hiring at all, they're just letting you in the office as a favor, you end up looking in the mirror and you see a different person. You see someone without the same confidence that you always saw in yourself, without the same bright future. We're going to have people by the hundreds of thousands, by the millions, they're going to lose their professions, and their profession is not going to be able to hire them. I was in Paris 3 months ago, and I went and visited this coding school, right? And this is a philanthropist set this up, 3,000 people, a lot of kids, but a lot of people at different ages. And it's a 3-year program. You could do it in 1 year if you really worked full-time and killed yourself. But it's 21 programs, no teachers, and the kids, when you're on, let's say you're on program number 6, you can see on your computer who else just finished program 6, who else is just starting it, and you get extra credit by helping each other. And while I was there, and I was there on a Sunday night at about 8:30, there were 800 people working on all these just row after row of computer screens. And I met these 2 guys who are from a trucking company who their job was to plan how to load the trucks for any different load going to a different place. You put the stuff way in the back that's going to come out last, right? That's going to be at the furthest away. And there's a whole science and a skill to doing that. And they had been told, and they knew, that in 4 or 5 years, there are going to be robots doing that job. They're going to be out of it. So they were learning basic coding. They're not going to be great software writers. They're not going to college. They're learning basic coding so they can be the technicians and the data managers who actually control the robots that are going to take their job. And I think that's the kind of mindset we've got to start getting into our whole culture, that we don't want to wait until it's on us. We've got to begin looking at sequentially what are those jobs we're going to eliminate. How do we get training done sooner? Noel Ginsberg is here, who's helped start CareerWise, which I think is the national model for apprenticeships. But that allows kids to get way out ahead of just learning the basics that are going to allow them to be able to adapt to however the economy changes. That's going to be something, again, we don't have the luxury of trying to make the Republicans or the Democrats winners or losers. It's going to take every ounce of our energy and a tremendous amount of resources. And if we don't get it right, it's just going to add to, as you described, the haves and the have-nots. It's just going to further divide the country and the state. Anyway, that's a good one to end on. Again, thank you guys for all your success. You make the whole state look spectacular.